Modern robotic vacuums have gotten really good, and they can handle about 95% of your daily cleaning needs. But for that other 5%, a cordless stick vac is a great tool to have around. But does it make sense to get a combo unit instead of buying a robot and a stick vac separately? Let's find out. I've got 4 of the most popular combo units on the market, and in this video I'll be testing their vacuuming performance on carpet and hard floors. Then I'll test their battery life on different settings. After that, we'll see if they can avoid tangles when cleaning pet hair and long human hair. I'll test their auto-empty base station and included accessories. And last, I'll take a look at their object avoidance, mapping quality, and apps. And as always, there are no sponsored reviews on this channel. The least expensive vacuum that we'll be testing today is the $399 SwitchBot K10 Plus Pro Combo. The K10 is SwitchBot's mini robotic vacuum platform, and the entire unit has an extremely small footprint, with the stick vac able to hang upright from its charging dock and auto-empty base station with the brush roller attached. After that, for $449 is the Eufy E20, which has a really unique design that integrates the handheld unit into the robotic vacuum itself. And as a result, the auto-empty base is very small, but the accessories will need to be stored somewhere else, like the E20's wall mount. Next, for $499 is the Yeti C12 Combo, which combines a more traditional looking base station with a bagless auto-empty system, with a dock for the handheld vacuum, a side mount for the brush roller, and a compartment for the rest of the accessories. And last, the largest and most expensive unit is the $999 Ecovac T30S Combo, which looks very similar to the C12, but substitutes in a more premium robotic vacuum with spinning mopping pads and an automatic mop washing station. But like the Yeti, it's got a similar side mount for the brush roller, and it's got a pull-out drawer for its vacuuming accessories. Starting with vacuuming performance first, I prepared a mixture of 10 grams each of flour, salt, flaxseed, and rice to simulate different dust and dirt particles, and I sprinkled that mixture on my high pile carpet. I weighed each robot's dustbin both before and after the run, and in between the rounds, I vacuumed the area thoroughly with a corded upright. And of the robots in this video, the Ecovac T30S picked up the most debris, collecting 24 grams or 60% of the mixture, followed by the Eufy with 22.7 grams, the Yeti with 22.2, and the SwitchBot K10 Plus Pro picked up the least debris at 20 grams or just 50% of the total mixture. And here's where those rank among other popular vacuums that I've tested. I then repeated that test with the stick vacuums using that same 40 grams of flour, salt, flax, and rice mixture, passing over the debris 4 times total from 2 different directions, and in this test, the Ecovac T30S and SwitchBot handhelds both picked up 34 grams or 85% of the mixture. The Yeti C12 handheld picked up 32 grams, and the Eufy E20 picked up a surprisingly low 26 grams or 65% of the flour, salt, flax, and rice mixture. And as a reference point, I ran that same test with my Dyson DC41 corded upright, which picked up all 40 grams of mixture plus an additional 4 grams of carpet fluff. Moving on to hard floor performance, I again spread 40 grams of that flour, salt, flax, and rice mixture on my LVP flooring, and I ran each vacuum on a 2-pass maximum suction run. And in this test, the Eufy E20 came out on top with 38 grams or 95% pickup, followed by the Yeti with 37.5 grams, the Ecovac with 36.3 grams, and the SwitchBot finished in last again with just 33.8 grams picked up, leaving little piles of debris in each spot that it turned around. And here's how those scores compare to the hard floor performance of some of the other vacuums that I recommend. For the handhelds, instead of just repeating that same test, I wanted to see how they would handle each individual size of debris on hard flooring. And starting with 10 grams of flour, all the vacuums except the Eufy were able to clean 100% of the flour off of the surface and out of the crevices in between planks. Moving up to 10 grams of the larger and more dense flaxseed, none of the vacuums had any issues at all. 15 grams of rice was mostly not a problem, but I did slow down the footage and I watched for any individual grains that got launched out of the pile, and the SwitchBot did the best with just 1 stray grain. The Ecovac had 2, the Yeti had 4, and the Eufy had 5 stray grains pushed away by its brush roller. And last, in a single pass cleaning of 5 grams of Rice Krispies, the best performer by a significant margin was the SwitchBot due to its larger front suction gate. The Ecovac came in second and the Yeti came in third with a fairly large pile built up in front, but the Eufy was solidly in last, and it clearly isn't designed to vacuum larger debris. And when you combine all the vacuuming scores, the Eufy, Ecovacs, and Yeti robotic vacuums were all extremely close in performance, with the Eufy coming out just barely on top, and the SwitchBot was quite a bit worse, finishing in last place for both carpet and hard floor pickup. In contrast though, the SwitchBot stick vac was very firmly in first place, followed by the Ecovacs and the Yeti, which had very similar performance. And the Eufy stick vac was quite a bit worse, finishing in last place. And that made all the combo scores extremely close, with the most expensive Ecovac's T30S coming in first, beating the SwitchBot by 1 point. The Yeti C12 was just 1 point behind that, and the Eufy E20 came in last due to its pretty poor stick vacuum performance. I also tested the battery life of each of the vacuums, starting with the stick vacs on carpet, and I selected the maximum amount of suction that would still smoothly roll on high pile carpet, and then I vacuumed until the battery completely died. And in this test, the Yeti died first at 14 minutes and 41 seconds. The SwitchBot died after a very similar 14 minutes and 43 seconds. The Ecovacs automatically lowered its suction at 7, 9, 11, and 15 minutes before finally stopping at 15 minutes and 50 seconds, and the Eufy was able to maintain medium suction power for 18 minutes and 31 seconds. I also tested each vacuum on maximum power on a hard surface, where the Yeti lasted just 8 minutes and 20 seconds, the Eufy died after 12 minutes and 55 seconds, the SwitchBot lasted 15 minutes and 15 seconds, and the Ecovacs stayed on for a total of 18 minutes and 56 seconds, but it only maintained its maximum power for the first 5 minutes. To judge the battery life of the robots, I sent them all on a single pass full clean of my entire downstairs, and the Yeti performed by far the best, cleaning for 59 minutes and using just 27% of its battery. The Ecovacs cleaned for 63 minutes and used 34% of its battery. The SwitchBot had the longest cleaning time of 68 minutes due to its smaller size, but it still only used 44% of its battery, and the Eufy cleaned for 59 minutes, just like the Yeti, but it used 61% of its battery, meaning its overall cleaning range would be less than half of the Yeti. I also tested their hair pickup and anti-tangle performance by shredding a cotton ball to simulate pet fluff and placing 30 individual strands of 16-inch synthetic hair on my high-pal carpet, and then sending each robot on a one-pass maximum suction run. And afterwards I collected all the remaining hair and fluff, and then I examined the vacuum for tangles. And here the piles on the left are the hair that remained on the carpet after cleaning, and the pile on the right is the hair that was wrapped and tangled on the main brush and side brushes of the vacuums. And you can see that the top performer by far was the Yeti that cleaned for 15 minutes and left just 3 small pieces of fluff on the carpet, and it had just a few pieces of hair wrapped around its main brush and a couple more on its side brush. The Ecovacs also performed decently, but unfortunately its object detection system caused it to skip over some of the fluff on the carpet. However, the brush roller itself was fairly clean due to the detangling teeth inside of the brush roller housing. The SwitchBot did a decent job of cleaning the fluff and hair off of the carpet, but basically none of it made it into its dustbin, and instead it was all wrapped around inside of the brush roller. And the Eufy not only left the most fluff and hair on the carpet, but it also had a decent amount wrapped around its brush. I repeated that same test with each of the handheld vacuums, and the Yeti, which confidently says tangle free right on the brush roller, did not disappoint and left 0 hair and fluff on the carpet, and it had 0 tangles on its brush roller, exactly as advertised. The SwitchBot and Ecovacs picked up all of the hair and fluff on the carpet, but quite a bit of it was stuck on their brush rollers afterwards, and the Eufy not only left hair on the carpet, but the brush roller was an absolute mess after this test, with both cotton fluff and hair tangled around the beater bar. So for hair pickup and tangle avoidance, the Yeti C12 combo was the best by far for both its robotic vacuum and its handheld performance, followed by the Ecovacs, then the SwitchBot, and the Eufy was in last place. After each test in this video, I also used the auto-empty function of the base stations, which I think is the biggest selling point of these combo units, and for the most part, they all worked great. I visually inspected all the dust compartments after each auto-empty, and all of them cleared the bins and unclogged their filters of any fine dust and debris. The Ecovacs, SwitchBot, and Yeti automatically trigger an auto-empty for their handhelds anytime they run for more than 30 seconds, which works perfectly and is extremely convenient, but the Eufy is a little more complicated since it needs to spin around to collect its dust. And as a result, the Eufy will always auto-empty its bin after a robotic cleaning, but if you want to use auto-empty after a handheld cleaning, you need to first reattach the unit to the robot, then wait for the robot to power on completely, then press and hold the home button for 2 seconds, and that starts the process for the robot to take care of the rest, spinning around, docking, and emptying the bin, which ultimately does work, but it's much less convenient than the other 3 combos. And on the subject of convenience, the SwitchBot K10 Plus combo is the only one of these vacuums that docks with the handheld unit fully assembled, which is a huge plus for me since 90% of the time I just want to use the extension and standard beater bar, but the downside of that is that there isn't a designated place to store the vacuuming head when you use one of the other attachments. And speaking of attachments, the Yeti and Eufy both come with a crevice tool and a combination dust brush, while the Ecovacs and SwitchBot come with a motorized upholstery brush tool in addition to their standard crevice tool and combination brush. As for the main brush unit and the general comfort of the handheld units, the SwitchBot is by far the most comfortable to use, with a very well balanced stick handle and a great turning radius. The Ecovacs and Yeti feel very similar to each other with good build quality and decent balance, but I personally prefer a stick handle to a pistol grip for maneuverability. And unfortunately, I'm guessing Eufy needed to make some ergonomic compromises to fit its suction unit onto the robot, and it definitely feels the least comfortable and most unbalanced to me. And one other slightly irritating thing about the Eufy is that you need to press and hold the on button for 2 seconds to get it to power on, rather than just a short press like the other vacuums. Another area where the SwitchBot really shines are its green LEDs on the front of the unit, which are more concentrated and better aimed than the blue LEDs on the front of the Ecovacs and Yeti. And as a result, I found it much easier to find dust and debris on the ground with the SwitchBot handheld than with any of the others. And unfortunately, Eufy really missed the mark on this one, including no lights at all on the front of their standard vacuum attachment. The Yeti handheld also has a mopping base that sticks onto the main brush with a magnet, but I don't really understand why you would ever choose to use a mop attachment over just a paper towel to clean up a wet mess, especially since the handheld unit has a sticker on it specifically warning against using it with wet messes. Also on the subject of mopping, the Ecovac's T30S robotic vacuum has the same mopping system found on a lot of flagship robots, with dual spinning pads that can extend from the side to reach into corners, and a self-cleaning station, while the SwitchBot K10 Plus Pro has a sort of wet wipe mopping system that, to be honest, I don't really think is worth using. But to be sure, I tested both units using my standard 10 milliliters of Florida mud on hard flooring test, and both performed about as expected, with the spinning mopping pads doing a good job visually cleaning the spot, but leaving quite a bit of residue as shown on the paper towel test, and the SwitchBot's wet wipe system was able to visually reduce the mud stains, but it also left some clumps of mud wherever it turned around, and you can see that the paper towel test also had a few clumps on it because that small wet wipe quickly became saturated with dirt. And for comparison's sake, I also ran my flagship 3i S10 Ultra with that same batch of mud to show what a current flagship vacuum with a roller style mop can do, and I think the paper towel test speaks for itself. In addition to better mopping performance, the other thing that you get when you spend more money on a robotic vacuum is better object avoidance. And to test that, I set out a pair of shoes, an extension cord, a sleeping dog, and a pile of rubber dog poop, and I sent each vacuum on a one-pass cleaning. And kind of as expected, the best performance came from the Ecovacs, which has their structured light True Detect 3D 3.0 system, but it definitely wasn't perfect, and overall it got way too close to every single object, and it nudged the shoes and the dog poop, and it ran directly over the extension cord, narrowly avoiding getting stuck. However, there is an option in the app to be more conservative with its obstacle avoidance, but you're going to need to decide whether to turn that on, because remember, even with it off, the T30S avoided some of the pet fluff in the earlier test due to its obstacle avoidance system. The Eufy also did surprisingly well for a robot without a camera, and its front-facing triple line lasers were able to detect and mostly avoid the dog poop, though it did still brush up against it enough that it probably would have been problematic, and like the Ecovacs, it did end up touching every object, but it didn't get stuck. The SwitchBot was able to avoid the sleeping dog and the shoes, but it ran directly over the wire and over the dog poop multiple times, which would have resulted in a definite poopocalypse, but it never got completely stuck, and it still did a much better job than the Yeti, which not only ran directly over the poop and cord, but it also violently tried to free itself from the cord tangle, and it managed to pull my daughter's desk chair across the room, which was an impressive feat of strength, but I can only imagine the disaster that it would have caused if that cord was attached to a lamp or something on top of a table. And last, talking about their apps, I think in 2025 we've pretty much got this figured out, and all the apps have the ability to create no-go zones, combine and divide different rooms, place carpet and other flooring types, and create schedules. But the Ecovacs, Eufy, and SwitchBot apps also support Google Home and Amazon Echo commands, but only the Ecovacs app supports specific room cleaning and only through Google Home. But that does allow you to say things like, "Hey Google, clean the kitchen," and it will trigger the T30S to do a specific room cleaning. So taking everything into account, are any of these combo units worth getting over just buying a separate robotic vacuum and stick vac? I think the answer is yes, and the killer feature on these things is their auto empty systems that keep the smaller handheld bins empty And the filter's free of dust and debris that can reduce their suction. And if you wanted to get that feature on a stick vac, even an entry-level model like the Shark Clean and Empty will run you around $299. So for just $100 more than that, at $399, the SwitchBot K10 Plus Pro gets you a high-performing, comfortable, and easy-to-use stick vac, plus the mini K10 robotic vacuum. And in all honesty, performance-wise, it is a below-average robotic vacuum, but it's still better than any other vacuum that you could get for under $100, and it does have the unique advantage of being able to fit into tight spaces like under stools and chairs and around toilets. And personally, I really like the compact, upright setup of the base station that easily tucks into a corner and stores the stick vac with the main brush attached. At $499, the Yeti C12 combo also has a high-performing stick vac with extremely good hair tangle resistance and an auto-empty robotic vacuum with performance similar to the budget-friendly $250 Dream D10 Plus, but again with much better hair tangle resistance. The C12 combo is also a bagless system, which I know is a huge upside for some people, even though I personally prefer bags for their ease of use. At $499, I think that the C12 combo is fairly priced and a decent deal. At its occasional $450 lightning deal price, I think that the value is undeniable, and if that price ever hits $399, it would be an amazing value and a no-brainer recommendation. The Ecovac's T30S combo is $999, and for that you get a higher-end vacuum with mop lifting and extension and a mop washing base station. But with Dream selling the very similarly performing L10S Ultra for $399, you could just buy that instead and still have $600 left in the budget for a higher-end stick vacuum like the Tenneco Pure 1 or Dream Z20 if you bought them separately. So while the T30S combo performed well, I don't think it really makes sense from a value perspective unless having a combo unit is really important to you. And last, in my opinion, the Eufy E20 is not priced correctly. Using the same suction motor and electronics for both the handheld unit and robotic vacuum seems like it should have resulted in a less expensive overall product, especially given the compromises in its stick vacuum performance. But the E20 is more expensive than the SwitchBot and just $50 less than the Yeti, with a lot less performance. So unless there is a significant price drop, I think that the Yeti and SwitchBot are much better options. As always, there are no sponsored reviews on this channel, but I do have links down in the description for all the vacuums in this video, and as always, I appreciate when you use those links, since as an Amazon affiliate, I do earn a small commission on the sale at no cost to you. Thank you so much to my awesome patrons over at Patreon for your continued support of my channel, and if you're interested in supporting my channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.